Welcome to this week's Sandpile. This week we're going to talk about, are you target or are you targeted? And it occurred to me in writing up my notes here that some folks may not know what Target is. So Target is a US based with some representation in Canada, but a large department store. I guess in the UK you'd call it Marks and Spencer. I don't know what you would call it in Australia, but the difference is this, are you acting like a big department store where you have many different departments, where you have many different products and services you offer? You're not real specific about the target market you're trying to approach. You build websites for many different kinds of companies. Or are you more targeted, where you're focusing on one niche and becoming an expert at that, and that's the way you want to approach your market. So I thought it'd be valuable to kind of talk about the two. Hopefully, you folks will have some opinions and some input. If not, we could be in for a shorter sample, but that's okay too. So, really, what is the difference? Well, we're talking the different markets. It's different advertising approach. It's different revenue potentially. Although, as I was writing my notes, I came to believe that might not necessarily be true. I think there might be some different knowledge required, or certainly some differences in the knowledge that you require for approaching a niche versus more of a broad stroke approach. So, does anybody have anything to add to that? What would be the difference between the department store approach versus the boutique store approach? Like, what are the general categories where you might expect a difference to be? Marketing, advertising, revenue, knowledge required, tools used. Irish. So we're talking about target versus targeting, targeted, I should say. Complexity and size, yeah. Ursh, what would be the name of a department store in your neck of the woods there? Oh, you also have Target. Okay, so Target's everywhere. So glad it made some sense. So potentially some complexity and size, maybe. Although you can build a pretty complex site and a pretty large site for a niche. I'm just making some notes on another screen here. All right. Well, I tried to get some general notes here, and hopefully it'll generate some conversation. So, what did I think would be the advantages of being Target, or the department store approach? And I thought, well, potentially there's a larger base to draw from. So when you're serving many different niches, many different markets, it seems rather obvious that you'd have a larger base of potential clients to choose from. Do you guys feel that's true? Yeah, I'd have to say I had a hard time convincing myself that it would be otherwise. You're not really limiting the people that you're dealing with. You're willing to take any kind of business and that kind of thing. I thought perhaps being Target might be more recession resistant. So I'd be interested to hear your opinion on that. So if you're taking business from a broad assortment of categories or such, if the oil industry is down, well, perhaps then the public school industry might be up, or perhaps the yoga industry is firing up when the car rental niche is going down. So I thought perhaps it would be more recession resistant. Does anybody have an opinion on that? Yeah, so Daniel's concurring that he's found that to be true. Mary's found it true to some degree. And Jack, I'm talking about if you're Target, where you're not really focusing on a niche. It's really more your broad strokes there. You're taking business from really anybody that approaches you. So I thought perhaps that would make you more recession resistant versus a fairly narrow niche where, like, I before I went to Chicago Digital, I used to work with coaches and speakers, business coaches and professional speakers. But if those folks weren't particularly hot at any point in time, it was sometimes tough to find business in other niches. Now, Lower Ads, it does add some variety to your day-to-day tasks, which can be good and can certainly be challenging too. Depends. If you're looking for some variety, that's fine. Sometimes, certainly with Chicago Digital, I build sites for different niches now. I do some yoga sites. I do some association type things. I do some medical marijuana sites. We do some for swimming pool sites, retirement places. And each one wants things in a slightly different way. They have different ideas about how things should go. So there's some learning curve around that. So Jack says, his belief is that a recession usually hits everybody in the larger market, while a niche could actually be recession-proof. That's interesting. Yeah, I could see why you would say that. A broad recession, people not wanting to spend money, but if you really knew your niche, and were known in that niche, then you could certainly, for the folks that are spending money, you could be attracting that business. Yeah, I get that, Jack. I would buy that. So I thought a broader scope of products could be offered. Again, if you're the department store approach, you can have a broader scope of products, so more reach into the available client funds. So if you are approaching a larger market, well, then naturally I thought you would have SEO services versus maybe some image editing, maybe some video production, maybe some assistance for email marketing and those kinds of things. I kind of thought just by design, you'd be bigger, and therefore you'd have more products to offer. And again, be able to get more of the available client funds, for whatever they're spending on their website, you'd have access to more of that purse, if you will. What do you folks think about that? And my next line was it's easier to be seen as a large agency. If you're offering that broader scope of products, you can certainly come across as a larger agency than perhaps you are. Yeah, or so are you suggesting that you're being, because of the products and services you offer, you're being seen as a larger agency than perhaps you feel you are? Okay, so you're trying to ramp up to that. So you're trying to build a team, whether it's virtual or contained within your company, so that you can have a broader scope of services. Web Team Adelaide. And yes, that's one of the challenges when you offer that, when you're trying to be a target, it's hard to keep up with everything, for sure. Mary concurs, virtual team, yes. And Barbara has an interesting note there. She says that they offer other products as well as website work. So I'm assuming in the graphic design world, perhaps the print world and those kind of things, so that you can definitely get more work from one client. It's the age-old story is it's much easier to keep an existing client and get more revenue from that than it is to continually find new clients all the time. So yeah, print and graphic design, for sure. For sure. So I thought about some of the advantages of being targeted or being more focused on a certain niche. And that's certainly the way I was operating before I moved to Chicago Digital with my Digital Link agency. But I found you can really focus on the verbiage and the call to actions that speak to a specific target market. So I feel you can get really good at using the words that specific niche uses. You start to speak in the way that they speak. And therefore, when someone in that industry is looking for someone to take care of their website, when you're already speaking the language that they're using, I found my conversion was higher than it was when I was trying to be broader. I don't know if anybody that's focusing on a niche has found that as well. Yeah, Mary agrees, or she agrees, yeah. And with a more targeted market, you can really focus on the products that make sense for that market. So while, if your target, you have a broader scope of products that you can offer, if you know who your clients are, you can really narrow it down to the products and services that make sense for that market, and in my opinion, really up your game on that. Be seen again as the expert in those products and services. So instead of trying to learn and offer 20 products and services, you offer 5, but they're really focused on the niche that you're trying to focus on. So Urs says she's fallen into a couple of niches. One is the accommodation business, because they now have an Airbnb. So that was a natural fit. Laura agrees with what I'm saying there. It does help up our game. Barbara works in a small town of 700, so you have to be flexible. The nearest small city is 45 minutes away. So I get what you're saying, Barbara. I will say, when I was operating, most of my clients were remote. I had very few that were in the town that I am in. And the town I'm in is larger. It was 100,000 people, but I only had 3 or 4 clients here. The rest of my clients were elsewhere in Canada or in the United States. So I'd be interested to hear how that works for you guys. So Urs says it helps that she's able to show an understanding of what the needs of the business owners are. For example, how to manage multiple booking calendars. This is her this accommodation biz that she's focused on. It also helps that partnering with experts in that field and getting the referrals. So she's finding focusing on that accommodation business is working for her for the reasons we discussed there. And Mary also concurs. She has local clients that she's never met in person. Well, that's true as well, yeah. So Urs, just to close that line of thought, she's partnering with a luxury accommodation short stay provider. So as she's focusing on that niche and getting contacts, getting connections, offering those products, becoming seen as an expert in that accommodation business niche, she's finding it simpler, perhaps, or more, makes more sense to partner with, like you say, a luxury accommodation short stay provider. And I'm assuming that the opinion is that kind of a partner would have more revenue available for site development. Correct me if I'm incorrect on that. Yes, yeah, thanks. So Jack asks, one issue with a niche is that each owner doesn't want you dealing with competition, such as caterers. So if you're doing business with a caterer in Jack's instance, how would I handle doing business with another caterer, with another caterer, with another caterer? If I'm focused on caterers, how do you convince those end clients that it makes sense to go with you when you have 4 or 5 caterers already? So I got to say, Jack, I didn't really get that question from the niche that I was focused on. And again, it was business coaches and keynote speakers. That was really who I focused on. And they didn't really typically ask who else I was doing business with. Now, some of that might have been because my clients were geographically disparate in that I only had 2 or 3 here and the rest were spread out across Canada and in the States. So perhaps that's why it didn't occur to me. Does anybody else have that? So for someone who's dealing with a lot of local clients, are they getting people saying, oh, you deal with XYZ and ABC? Well, then I don't think you're necessarily the right person to take care of my site, because I don't want to share information. Maybe there's some issues with or concerns with privacy. Maybe there's some concerns with industry secrets getting out. So anybody have an opinion as to how they would handle that? So Urs thinks she could see that in some areas it might be an issue. Mary finds it works as an advantage for her rather than a hindrance. Yeah, Urs is also partnering with an author expert for author and speaker websites. I don't know. I guess you'd have to find a couple of sentences around that, Jack. And if that comes up, you got to be able to speak to it for sure. I don't know. Like I say, I just was not getting those kinds of questions. They, generally speaking, found it advantageous that I had some knowledge of the industry and other clients in that industry. They weren't really saying, well, I'm worried that you're going to share my secrets with these other folks. And it might be as simple as, business coaches and keynote speakers have been around a long time, and there's perhaps not much new in those niches. So Daniel says he's found it's been a non-issue. Like you have not had a client ask who else he works for. So I'd be interested if anybody else has had a client say, no, I don't want to do business with you because you're already doing business with these other clients. And maybe the answer there, Jack, is that it doesn't seem to be a concern. Have you had that happen for you in your agency, Jack? Or is it just a ponderance, as it were, which is probably a made up word, but. So he's finding that in the catering field, it is an issue. It's interesting to me because, Jack, I would have thought that in the catering field is an established niche. It's been around for a while. Is there new innovations? Like, are people concerned about like secrets being taken, or are they more concerned about my design looks like so-and-so's design looks like so-and-so's design? Have you got a feel for that? So I guess the summarize the question, is it secrets based, or is it just, I don't want to be the same based? Is that their concern? So I think I got my answer on this one. I wondered if you folks thought it was easier to be seen as an expert if you were focused on a niche. I believe that, but I wonder what you guys thought. Ursh seemed to imply that. I think Mary said the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. On the whole, how do you handle people? On Jack's question there, like the old adage of you wonder why there's gas stations. You go to an intersection and there's 3 or 4 gas stations on the same corner. And when you think about that, I used to wonder, well, why would they want all that competition? But what they've discovered is that by doing that, they together get more customers than they would on their own if they were separated by a few blocks, because people know that there's gas stations on this intersection, so they're drawn to that. And I wonder if there's some level of that in what I'm just saying here. Yeah, Mary says it's easier to focus on a niche rather than learn new industries. There's a pretty broad stroke of knowledge required if you're going to work in multiple industries, because people expect you to be able to speak in their language, if you will. At least that's my opinion. It definitely makes it an easier sale if you can speak their language. Yeah. So as I was trying to think of disadvantages of being a target, being that whole department store setup. And certainly I think we've already covered this, but knowledge required to serve your clients. I think you need a lot more if you're trying to cover many different niches. In order to do a good job, I think you need to have a lot more knowledge than if you're going to focus on a niche. Yeah. It can get really boring. Now, I'm wondering if you mean target or targeted. Maybe it's a little bit of both. My thought is, Leslie, that that would be a disadvantage of being targeted. If you're always dealing with the same niche, it could get a little bit boring, perhaps. The other disadvantage for being a target or the department store approach is I believe you get less conversion on marketing efforts. So because I call it, you're fishing with a net versus fishing with a spear gun or a hook. So when you're a department store and you're serving many different markets, you're by design forced to have a broader scope of marketing material. You're trying to hit so many different markets. I feel personally it kind of waters down your message a bit, or at least you have to be a little bit craftier in your message. And I don't know that your conversions are necessarily as high. So to me, that translates into higher cost. You have to have larger lists, and you got to be a better writer, I think, if you're trying to pull a broader scope of folks into your funnel. Mary says she has to weed out a lot of tire kickers, so it gets hard to get people to self-select in that, or where they believe you're the right person, or they see right away that you're not necessarily the right person, and consequently you see right away whether they're right for you or not. Yeah, so Leslie indicates it's much cheaper to target to a target market. I think it is, and I think your conversions are higher because you can get right a much more focused message. That said, there's the other disadvantages, which you if you have 100 people to shoot at versus 1,000 people or 10,000 people to take a shot at, you know you got to be pretty good to make sure you get what you need out of that 100 versus the whole fishing with a net thing and getting what you need out of a 10,000, say. So Barbara's saying in the remote area that she's working in, people tend to want to work with someone close by. So I think you said there were 700 in your area there. They're really focused on supporting local businesses and supporting the local community first, if at all possible. So by design, Barbara, that means you pretty much need to help anybody that comes your way, if you will. So Leslie's living in Hawaii. I hope you're well away from the volcanoes and such there, but has clients literally all over the world, which is nice. Yeah. And I would agree with that, Leslie. I definitely had, other than time zones, I definitely felt it was much easier to work with anybody anywhere, if you will, or certainly I had lots of folks in North America. Oh, you're about 90 miles away from the volcanoes. So good. I'm glad you're safe there. So again, coming around to this disadvantages of being targeted or having a focused niche, and I'll say again, somewhat reliant on that market's success. So your success is really tied to the success of that market. So if you're focusing on the oil and gas industry and that's currently down, that can certainly have an impact on your ability to generate new clients, or certainly even to generate revenue within the niche. So Daniel's indicating that his market is close to 1 million. Many of his clients prefer to work with the local agencies. Consequently, nearly all clients are from his city, which is interesting. So I'm assuming when you say your market is close to 1 million, that's like 1 million people or maybe 1 million businesses even. So lots to choose from, but it's interesting that they still want to work with someone that's from the city. There's almost like a bell curve there, where if it's really small, it's like the 700 for Barbara, they want to work with someone local. If you're kind of up to a certain level, they don't much care. And I think once they get big enough for it to be an issue for them, they want someone local because you're going to meet with them. They want someone who understands the city that they're working in and all the rest of it. So my thought is maybe it's a bell curve. Yeah, yes, 1 million people. Urs says it could be more to do with the way referrals are made. Locals are likely to recommend locals they know. To some degree, that's true. Although I guess I would have to call it local. I was getting most of my business came from referrals, but it would be someone in one city knew somebody in another city 4 hours away, but because they talked regularly, I would get that referral. So they were in the same niche, but in disparate cities. So they just happened to know each other. So they saw each other at conventions, or they talked to the same people in webinars or in courses and stuff. So Leslie says it also, I'm sorry if it's I don't know if you're a she or a he. I'm going to say she. Correct me if I'm wrong. She. Thank you. You also believe it depends on how technical a niche language is. So she gets most of her clients because they can't find a local person who speaks their language. Yeah, that's exactly what I was finding. And they don't need to educate her. So again, you leverage that when you're able to use their vernacular, use their verbiage, I believe they start to feel that you're talking about their business, not your business. You're not talking about websites. You're talking about their business, if that makes sense. So you're in fitness there. So when you start using their language and you're talking about fitness and you're talking about their business, I find the conversion is much higher. The acceptance is much higher. Yes. Cool. So another disadvantage of being targeted is you may miss opportunities in other markets if your marketing is narrowly focused. So in Leslie's case, if her marketing and website and all the rest of that is around fitness, and someone from a caterer drops onto her site, they may not even call. They may not even approach her, even though she could be a great pick for them. They may see that she's focused on that one niche and pass her by for someone perhaps that's focused on caterers, or perhaps more of a department store approach where their marketing is around accepting anybody that comes their way. Yeah, Mary says part of her niche service is full support, not a do it for you. Not a do it yourself. It's a do it for you. So Mary's focused on I'll take care of you. Just whatever you need, I'll take care of it. And this is my monthly fee. Sign here, press hard. I certainly did that for a while, and it worked well for me. Yeah, unless he's indicating that most people who are out of her niche, it's because of the referral from another person or site that she's done work for. Yeah, for sure. The referral is quite large. So I wondered out loud to myself earlier, are there extra costs involved with either approach? So in your opinion, is it more expensive to run a department store type agency, or is it more expensive to run a niche focused agency? Or is it really just, it costs money to run a business and you don't see much difference between the two? So here says extra marketing costs for targeting, perhaps. Although, again, sending 100 messages versus 10,000 messages, maybe that's a wash. I don't know. Unless he stole my thunder, she says it can be more expensive depending on how many niches you want to target. Later, I want to bring up that you don't have to focus on just one niche. You can do many. So thanks for bringing that up. That's all cool. And there's extra marketing costs for targeting because you need to do multiple marketing. Interesting. So you feel that it takes multiple messages to get to a niche versus more of a broad scoped approach. Is that what you're saying, Ersh? Oh, if you have multiple niches. So yeah, one message to 10,000 people versus sending out, 5 messages to 5 different niches and the associated follow-ups to those kind of things. I think that's what you're saying. There's also, I think you need to know more than one system. So if you're in a department store type niche, the potential is pretty high. You're going to need to know more than one hosting platform or more than one system, if you will. We've been lucky with Business Catalyst in that it did a lot of things, but going forward, I think one of the things a lot of us have seen is the need for multiple platforms to service the needs. So if you're outside of a niche, if you several niches, or if you're in the department store approach, I think you're going to find you need more than 1 or 2 platforms. So there's some costs associated with that. Yeah, and also the system that the business actually uses. She gets a lot of business because she also specializes in appointment software and certainly understands how to use it. So I don't know. I think there's extra costs probably involved in both ways. I don't know that I could say it's much more expensive to run this kind of an agency versus this kind of agency. I personally think the trade-offs, other than size, like when you're acting as a department store, I think just by design you end up growing. I think I've seen that with Chicago Digital. When you're offering your business to that many people, when you are successful, you do find that you're hiring more developers, you're hiring more designers, whether you're bringing them in or bringing them in virtual. But I think by design, that department store, the target approach, you wind up being a bigger agency. Now, maybe you folks have an opinion on that. Yeah, that's a good point, Leslie. It comes out in the wash with either. I kind of agree with that. But to start a web design agency, it might be easier to start in a niche and then grow from there. Keep things narrowly focused, understand that front to back. And then if you want to expand, pick up another niche, pick up another niche, pick up another niche. And eventually then you're a department store, right? Yeah. So Mary says, the Target or department store approach costs her more because she has to learn about each business. And she's finds she doesn't charge for that. The discovery process where you're learning about their business, what's important to them, whereas if you're in a niche and you understand how call to actions work in that niche, how conversion works in that niche, it's much easier to shortcut to the final there, if you will. So I wondered, where does each approach find their customers? So maybe we'll start with the department store, the Target approach. Where do you think, is there a difference in the way they find their customers? We've talked about email marketing, but if you're a broad stroke agency, where do you go fishing with your net? Where are you trying to pull these customers from? Is it, are you firing up billboards and bus stops? Are you advertising in periodicals, magazines, or newspapers? Are you taking out TV ads? Are you focused on a YouTube channel or writing a blog or email newsletters? Yeah, the ocean. Good job, Mary. So is that different than if you're trying to run a niche? For me, for a niche, you learn where that niche looks. Is it always in a certain magazine? Is it in an association? Can you get lit up on an association? I was doing keynote speakers, so I found it was the same stable of speakers showing up at all these and speaking at these different events. So I could either attend those events or I could provide what's the word, where I would pay to promote myself there. I'd provide donations to run the event, and then in return for that, I would get my my logo or my name and such on some of the slides at the end, and perhaps even some of the table stakes and such. So Leslie finds podcasts have been great for the niche that you're working on. Yes, definitely. So Ursh is focused on referrals and does a lot of training or speaking. Daniel finds for his department store marketing, it's done with online organic listings and Google AdWords. Some general web design agency keywords. That's kind of what I thought you would be doing, yeah. And Barbara finds she's, again, in a smaller town there. She's getting referrals from people that she knows, and then through the Chamber of Commerce, the local Chamber of Commerce. And Ursh says some people found her on Google, for sure. I mean, you kind of have to be on Google for sure. But I just wondered if there's a difference in approach there. And I think, I think if I summed it up, it would be, again, fishing with a net versus fishing with a hook. That would be the difference. Whatever you can imagine that might look like. And Jack indicates for a niche, your agency link at the bottom of a website is important, and definitely agree with that. Leslie concurs with that as well. And then if you can, that link should go to a landing page where you talk about, where you're using that industry's words, you're using that what that industry understands to pull them through a landing page with a call to action at the bottom. Yes. So Doug says he's finding that the market referral marketing is key. His market referral marketing is key, including industry-specific knowledge. So Doug, I'd be interested to know, do you ask for referrals? Do you actively pursue them, or are they just coming because folks are happy? Mary finds testimonials work great for you. And again, I'd ask you the same thing, Mary. Are you asking for testimonials or just taking them when offered? Like, do you actively pursue them? Yeah, so it's asking. And Doug's been fortunate. He has not had to solicit referrals. They're just coming his way. I had much the same experience, Doug. So that was fine. What I was really after was the timing, and for Mary as well. So, after the site launches, while they're happy, while they're ecstatic with you and the great new site, to me, that's the perfect time to ask for a testimonial, ask for a referral in some way, shape, or form while they're happy. Yeah. Do you offer any incentive, perhaps some cross promotion? Do you consider running in your client list? This is my list of clients, and maybe providing some cross linking in there. Is anybody doing any of that? Cheesy old, white hat link building. Okay, Laura, thanks very much. Actually, Laura, there is no Sandpile next week. I was going to say that for the end, but I'm away again next week, and I can't get anybody else to run it. So join us in 2 weeks, and I'll send emails out to that effect anyway. But so I did want to make the point that if you're targeted to a niche, you're not limited to a single niche. You could certainly set up around multiple. Each has its own vernacular. It has their own verbiage. And you can certainly provide different and appropriate products and services based on what that niche needs. So for those that are targeting niches, are you finding you can be completely disparate, completely different niches, or are you finding them to be related? Like, I was doing business coaches, and then keynote speakers made sense to me, so I kind of grouped them together. They were a nice parallel couple of niches. Yeah, so Leslie's finding that they're related. For her, it's industries that are using appointment software. So they could be different industries, but they're the glue that holds it together is the appointment software. Hers tends to not do e-commerce. I can't blame you there. And if she does e-commerce, it's just basic sites. It's hard to disagree with that. That's a potential Pandora's box of things. Now, that said, if you can do it and be good at it, that's a niche too. No, I also professional services. Yeah. Not niche enough. So by professional services, you're meaning doctors, dentists, accountants, lawyers, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. Well, you definitely got to get a little more granular than that, I think. Dentists. I thought a few years ago, someone was going to go after dentists really hard, and I says, "Well, good luck with that, because the scheduling software people like Leslie have them so tied up with their scheduling software that it's a brutal market to try and get involved with." So if anybody, the dentist, I get text messages, I get emails, I get phone calls. When I'm at the office, before I leave, I've got a new appointment set up. They've really got that bottled up. So to get a website out of that, I think, is almost impossible. Daniel says something that I'm finding myself as well. He's not getting a lot of requests for e-commerce sites. And we've been having some conversations in Chicago Digital, and it's almost to the point where for a certain level of sites, you're almost better to send them over to Amazon and have them set up an Amazon storefront and then link that back into their site if that's what they really want. So I'd be interested to hear your opinion of that. I don't know that we've gone that far yet, but we're kind of leaning that direction in some cases for a certain size customer. Someone wants to sell 20 items, might just be better for them to set up an Amazon store. Jack's so far finding Shopify is working well for the e-commerce sites that he's building. I'd be interested to hear the long-term prognosis of that. Yeah, it can be tough to get it right at the price point that's available. I would have to agree with that. Now, I did on the other side of that is, so if you are a target, if you are the department store approach, it doesn't stop you from having some very specific marketing efforts and bringing them to a landing page for conversion. So it doesn't mean it's not an all. I guess I'm saying it's not an all or nothing thing. You can be target and targeted where it makes sense for your business, for sure. Yeah, Doug, that's kind of what we're finding too. And the revenue, what folks want to pay for those sites is a bit of a challenge. Certainly in the smaller storefront area there, where they don't have a ton of stuff for sale. You know, if you're talking 1,000 items or 2,000 items, well, then it makes sense for these larger platforms. But yeah, well, if anybody's got some knowledge of working with Amazon, I'd be happy to host a Sandpile on that. We haven't pulled the trigger on that just yet, so I'm not to a point where I could host that. But so, does being target by default imply you need to be a large agency? What do you guys think of that? So if you're doing that whole department store approach where you're taking business from any market that comes your way, does that by default imply you need to be a large agency in order to have that work for you? So when you're fishing with a net, someone needs to unload the net, if you will. Someone needs to go through the fish that you're pulling in and see if they're appropriate for your business or not. Does that always need to be you, or do you think it just implies you need to be a larger agency? Now, Earth says perhaps if you want to do it well, you need a diverse range of skills and solutions, and it's tough to be all of that just on your own. You can certainly build a virtual team. It doesn't have to be that you have 20 people in house, but maybe you have the whole virtual team thing, which I know you're doing there. But Mary says she's a target type only because she's lazy. So all right. I have my moments with that too. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that you have to be a large agency to offer that kind of broad spectrum approach of stuff. I think you have to accept then that your conversion rate's going to be lower. Perhaps your cost of marketing might seem a little higher just because you have to send more out. I don't know. So if you were targeted on a specific niche, would you actually turn away a customer that is not in your market or does not fit the niche that you're focusing on? And then, yeah, Doug indicates broad spectrum happens over time, sometimes without planning. Unless he has clients out of her niche. And what I was really getting at was, do you feel you can do your best work outside of your market? Yeah, Urs kind of echoes what I'm feeling. Like if you didn't think you could do a good job of it, I think I would pass that work on to someone. I would try and build relationships with other niche providers, and if it's appropriate, pass it on. I think I'd far rather see that as a success than doing just an okay job in a niche that I didn't understand. Yeah. So she's finding over time now she's hopeless with things like the beauty or fashion industry. Mary concurs. Yeah, I would have a tough time doing anything in that line of work. Too funny. Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess I would say I haven't necessarily sent anybody away. Well, no, I have actually. Someone came to me. They wanted an e-commerce setup for a chocolate store. They had a real specific niche of chocolate they were providing, and I passed it on to someone in another city in the next province over, actually, which would be like the next state or whatever you want to call it. They're 9 hours away by drive. But I'd met that person at a event I was sponsoring for a keynote speaker, maintained the connection, and that person had an agency that made sense for this chocolate company. So I did pass it on. Yeah, I like that, Doug. That's a good line. The tagline is, "We are a talented, agile group of independent contractors. This allows us to keep our overhead low and your cost to a minimum." I like it. I'd almost want to change that, your cost to a minimum, and turn that more into a value statement, where they get the most value, where you get the most value for your dollars. Rather than focusing on I'm the lowest cost, I would turn it into something more along that I'm the best in value. But that's just that's my dad always said, it's free advice, take it for what it's worth. Yeah, Mary, agency does sound expensive. Payroll would kill her, but in some ways it's nice to not have to do the work, if you will. I know I'm on the receiving end of some work I'd rather not have to do, because I'm the senior web developer. But if I was the agency owner like Mike Salander, I could say, Dave, go do this. There's some value in that. Yeah, think about that, Doug. That's turning into a value statement as opposed to a cost statement. I just hate the thought of all of us trying to circle the drain down to the lowest cost, because no one wins in that. So Urs asked a broad question there. Have I found the change from being a solo agency to how have you found the change from being a solo agency to part of a bigger one? Overall, it's been just an excellent experience. Everybody at Chicago Digital has been fabulous to me. I like not having to look for the next job. I like having training available, being able to take time and their understanding of investing in the training. So if I spend a few hours here and there, or a month or a week, whatever, their understanding that training goes back into the work I do is there. There's definitely some value in that. I worked in the corporate world for a lot of years, a few decades. So I like having that, that paycheck on the 15th and the 30th. There was something to be said for the dynamics of being your own agency and having a kind of an unlimited ceiling on what you can make, other than you still have to do the work. But I just like not having to worry about it. I got a paycheck shows up in my bank account. I have benefits. I have vacation. When I'm going away next week for a week, and I'm not worried about it at all. Everybody knows I'm going away. My projects are either someone else is taking care of them, or it's planned where they're taken care of. So for me, it was good. I found even operating as an agency on my own, I tended to work, 7 to 4, 7 to 5, whatever, every day, Monday to Friday. I didn't take advantage of that whole on my own thing, where if I wanted to go golf on Wednesday afternoon, I went and golfed Wednesday afternoon, and that kind of stuff. Overall, it's been great to me. So, my opinion. I've talked to other folks, and they find they couldn't take the constraint of that. They didn't have that experience. They haven't worked for anybody for a long time, and they didn't mind chasing the new work, and they liked being on their own and being able to make their own choices. And if they decided they wanted to do something different or not do this anymore, they just decided to not do that. So that said, yeah, I'll just close that off with saying there are times when I get things that I have to do that I don't necessarily enjoy, but for me, the trade-off is well worth it. Yeah, that regular paycheck for a guy who I worked for a telephone company for 25, 30 years, and the big phone company, and then a smaller one, and that was 20, yeah, it's 30 years basically. So I got used to the whole corporate lifestyle and enjoyed it. So yeah, Mary. So when she looks at that's, I guess I got to say, I mean, I went back to school 2011, 2012 in a graphic and web design program at a college here in my local town. It was a 4-year university program condensed into 18 months, real intense. And I came out the other end of that and I saw what they were paying junior graphic designers and junior web developers and said, I can't live on that. So the only way forward for me was to become my own agency. And I'd been attracting work anyway, so I figured I could have a go of it. And I did quite well. And I got well known in the industry, in the business catalyst industry. And I'm grateful certainly to Sandpile for a lot of that, but going to Adobe Max. And I built up a reputation and my skill set enough. So at some point, Mike and Scott from Chicago Digital said I was contracting to them anyway for a couple of years. And they said, why don't you just come work for us? So I kind of have to agree with him, Mary, that you kind of have to come in at a higher end of that, or it can be a challenge to live on the wage of what's offered. So Doug says, as an entrepreneur, he works much longer hours. It's not a lifestyle business. Now, what I used to say, Doug, is I work for myself. I can work any 18 hours of the day that I want. That was my deal. And that's really what it felt like. It was a lot of hours. And I other than Sandpile, I work 7 to 3 basically, with an hour of lunch that I take at the end. So if you want to look at it that way, it's 7 to 4 even. But at 4 o'clock, my wife and I, we go out for a walk. We walk downtown, have a coffee, whatever, come back, go visit the grandbabies. And there's a lot to be said for that lifestyle. And you talk about it being a lifestyle business. That said, when I had my own agency, I was making more money for sure. But it was wearing me down more too. I was certainly working more hours. So I'm not sure if you did an hour to pay comparison, if I was making any more money. I was just working more. All right, just another few minutes. I think I got a few more things here. So I asked if you would turn away customers not in the market. That was the last one. So if you are a target, are you forced to offer a broad spectrum of products or services? So if you're operating as a department store, can you really only offer building websites, or do you need to offer, graphic design, print design, search engine optimization, maybe even video production and all the rest of that? Are you by design forced to do that if you're trying to market to a much broader base of customers? Yeah. I do have a really good deal with Mr. Salander and company and Scott, and they've been nothing but fabulous to me. I feel valued. I get feedback every week that I'm doing a good job. It's been a great company to work for sure. Yeah, Irish, I think there is an expectation that you're kind of forced to offer that broad spectrum of products or services. That's when people are shopping at that kind of department store agency level, they don't want to go to 4 or 5 different companies to get all the services that they feel they're going to need. So I think kind of by design, you need to offer it. Whereas if you're niche focused, I think as you're finding, you tend to develop your relationships in the industries that make sense for that niche. So you might pull 2 or 3 other niche focused agencies close, one maybe for SEO, one maybe for video production, and you partner up with them and are in that way able to offer a nice package. Yeah. If you don't offer it, you should have someone you can turn to. Just in closing, Daniel asked, will Code Production be presenting their platform progress soon? It's interesting you ask. Just before this Sandpile, I was posting the meeting for that. So that's July 17th. At a special time, I'm sorry for the folks in Australia, but Alex requested a 9 a.m. San Francisco time zone or time for the Sandpile on the 17th. So I did agree with that. And I know that's the middle of the night for the folks down under there, so you may have to watch the recording, but that was the compromise. And Mary has an off topic. Let me just look at my last of these questions here. I think I only got a couple of things left here, Mary, so let's try and get through them. So if you're going to target market, or if you're going to be target like a department store, type operation, do you need to have what I call industrial strength processes and documents? For instance, do you have to be really focused on your invoices and your billing? Do you need 800 numbers? Do you really feel you need to look good on that? So if you're operating as that big agency, you don't want to send an invoice that comes via a Word document or an email that says, hey, you owe me $50. I think you have to have a nice looking invoice, a nice looking billing system where someone can come and pay their bill. And as I say, maybe even 800 numbers. What do you guys think of that? Am I still in the pot business? Yeah. I'm still building medical marijuana sites. Yeah. But I'm doing it now for Chicago Digital rather than anybody in Canada here. So the one that I had in Canada went to a different agency. They were in a big city, a big market, Vancouver, Canada, and they met somebody there that they felt could better service their needs rather than me doing it remotely. So, and then there's someone that was just north of me here. They went off a Business Catalyst about a year and a half ago. So, but that said, and now I'm starting to do it for Chicago Digital. So it's kind of funny to me. Yeah, I think you do have to have good, solid processes and proper invoicing and systems. I guess my opinion is you kind of have. That's why I kind of added the industrial strength to it. I think you got to be. You almost have to look like the government, if you will, if that gives you a picture. Yeah, Barbara kind of concurs that a lot of freelance people don't come across necessarily as professional as they could. Yeah. One of the best things I found, frankly, was PayDirt, which is a great app for sending invoices, for keeping track of time, and for allowing people to pay their bills and stuff. It comes across as really well done, in my opinion. And then the last thing I had before Mary's off-topic question, in either case, how important is consistent outbound marketing? For instance, newsletters, blog posts, all the rest of that stuff. So in a Target or a department store type of environment, is that more important than if you're focusing on a niche, or do you think it's about the same? Yeah, it's kind of the thing you're supposed to do and never get to. But I think if you can get your head around that and get delivering that content on a regular basis, I think that's the kind of stuff that pushes you up in customer eyes, and certainly even just doing blog posts and such gets you that organic search results on Google. If you can get the topics that are reasonable, don't pay someone offshore to write your blog post for you. I tried that with some telecom clients I had, and it was not great. Either write your own or get someone local that's got some interest, so you're not just regurgitating someone else's content. But so I'm just reading back up here, Jack. Yeah, we haven't decided that yet, Jack, but it's doubtful. But I'll never say never. I don't know that it hasn't been shared with me anyway. Where we might go forward here with BC Academy stuff. So whether we'll offer platform OS videos or whatever, but I'm sure Adam Broadway and his team will have plenty. Certainly the town halls are going on. That's kind of a parallel thing to Sandpile here for the platform OS world. So there's some stuff that's evolving there, and you're going to have to go find it over there, sure. I'm not sure what you mean there, Doug, when you say that your reports are typically 20 pages long. Which reports are those? Barbara finds that networking is real important, but they consider email marketing and blogging is important for niches. I think it's probably even networking is more important if you're in a niche, Barbara, but it's a matter of finding it. Like I think you said the Chamber of Commerce or someone else did. Getting out to where those clients are. I used to ingratiate myself with my keynote speakers, and you'd show up there and there'd be a weekend where there's 10 or 12 people speaking. So you'd show up because you have one client, and I'd invariably leave with another one because of that relationship. Customer invoices and activity reports. Yeah. And sorry, Doug, I'm not quite catching what you're asking there. Mary, if you want to ask your question real quick, you had one that was off topic, and then we'll close with that. And I will say, this is the end of the regular time. I'm willing to stay long enough to look at Mary's question and see if we can give her an answer. But for those that need to leave, thank you again for showing up. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. I'm going to go see my grandbaby next week. Most welcome. So Mary, you're feeling stuck about your own website and targeting. You're feeling a bit silly about that. Fair enough. So one thing, Mary, has anyone hired help? I would suggest you find someone you can do a bit of a discovery with, where someone asks you questions about your business and helps you really understand who your target market is, who you're trying to approach. And I used to do that with my clients. I don't know, I have some 40 or 50 questions, but they're focused on keynote speakers and business coaches, so they're not much good for you. But it really came down to understanding why clients buy from you. Who's your client? And when I say that, I mean you and I should be able to sit at a coffee shop. I've used this analogy before, but we should be able to sit there, have coffee, watch people walk by, and I should almost be able to point to someone and say, "That's your customer, Mary." So you don't say, small businesses. That's not broad. That's not narrow enough. If you really want to focus on a niche, you have to get right down to where I can say, my customer is Bob, and he's from this city. His income bracket is this. He's like, you really have to get that specific. And what I like to say is, when you learn to speak to Bob, then now you're using his vernacular, and other people will see that and be drawn to it. And even frankly, people that are in parallel industries will still get what they need out of that. That's my best advice here, really, is to find someone you can do a bit of a discovery session with. Personas is exactly the broad term for what I'm describing there, Jack. Yeah, thank you. An agency that helps web agencies. Yeah, Leslie's got a good copywriter for sure. The trick really, though, is to understand who you're trying to talk to. And the line I use a couple of lines. One is, when you try to talk to everybody, you talk to nobody. So you really have to get down to where you're talking to, almost like you're talking to one person. Thanks for the link there, Urs. That might help, Mary. That to me really is the key, is understanding who you're trying to speak to. And whether it's an agency or like a target department store type of agency, or whether it's a niche, you still need to understand who you are and how you're trying to approach the market, who you're trying to attract. So even if you're after a broad message, you still have to understand the reasons you're using the words and terms that you're using, and then how you're leading people through your funnel to get out to the bottom, how you're helping them self-select if they're not your kind of customer, and how you're helping them call you if they are your customer. Irish, I mean, maybe through this channel, you guys can help each other. If you treated each other like a new customer and offered to do like a discovery type interview for each other, you might learn what you need to move forward. Yeah, Trisha's tired of the whole department store web design company. It's tiring. I would have to agree. Mary, if you still have access to BC Gurus, there was a tutorial on there where Mike Selander and Brent Weaver did a discovery, went through a whole discovery document where I can't remember if Mike interviewed Brent or Brent interviewed Mike, but basically one of them pretended to be a business looking for a website, and they kind of walk through the process of going through the discovery. And I think you might, if you have access, that might give you some insight. Hmm. I can't put my fingers on it right this second, but if you look under Mike's profile, it'll be listed under there. He did eight or 12 different videos, so it should be easy to find. All right. Well, thanks everybody for staying on a little bit longer. And if anybody feels they can help Mary, then feel free to reach out to her there. And thanks very much, Hirsch. Yeah. And I'll set up the email so that it's a reminder that there isn't one next week and that there is one the following weekend after. But looking forward to the Code Productions update on the Treeple. And then we actually have Webflow is going to do a session not 3 weeks from now. So next week's off. The week after that's Treeple update. And then the week after that is Webflow. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll see you next time.